Hello, Jessica Weaver, and I'm here with Stacey Valentine, our estate attorney for our Strong Retirement Club, and we are so excited to introduce you to the club ladies.
Thanks.
You'll be meeting her next in 2 months in February, and we're going to talk about estate planning. What's the process? How does it begin? What does it cost? And a lot of the things that might be overlooked a lot of the times, and also how we integrate with the money, your retirement plan, and the estate plan, how they all work together. Stacey's been doing this for over 10 years. She's fabulous. I'm really excited to introduce her to you ladies. So Stacey, let's begin with, what is estate planning?
Sure. So that's a big question. So estate planning, I think for most people, at least at the starting point, is to take a look at your family and your goals and your assets and implement foundational documents that make sure that you have a plan in place. If, God forbid, something were to happen that, either you have an incapacity event or a death in the family, that everything's kind of set up so that it flows the right way to the people you've intended. And that you're doing all of that in a way that's tax efficient and follows all the legal rules and that fun stuff.
Yeah, it can save you money. It can save in taxes.
Absolutely.
It can save in a lot of headaches. Because how long does a typical estate take a simple one?
Right. So assuming you have documents in place, right, most relatively straightforward estates still take about a year to administer. If you don't have a will or don't have documents in place, you could double or triple that time pretty easily. Particularly if you have someone in the family who might cause some kind of issue. And then you could find yourself in a litigation situation where you're paying lawyers a whole bunch of money to do a bunch of malarkey.
Yeah, we've had a few clients in those cases.
Yeah, they're not fun.
No, they're
we
not
try to
fun.
avoid that.
Yes. And I've seen people, when they try to settle an estate by themselves, they'll be like, oh, I've been doing this for 5-10 years, and they can't get themselves over the hump. So it makes so much sense to make sure to reach out to somebody like you.
100%. And so our
team, if
you
are an executor of an estate.
Our team is happy to help to any degree, right? So I tell clients all the time that we don't care if you're just asking us to help with the parts you don't know about, or if you come in with a box of paper and say, call us when this is over, right? And I think as the process goes on, typically people get us involved more because they realize how long it's going to take and how onerous the process can be. Yeah.
Very true. Yeah, it's because you're grieving the loss of somebody. And then I'll give you an example. I'm helping my good friend. Her father passed away, and her mom didn't handle any of the money. So her and her sister have stepped in, and they're trying to figure it all out. And he had all over the place money, all over the place. And they can't even grieve because they're trying to figure out all the money stuff. So it takes them out of that moment. And that's when they reached out to me, like, it's just too much at this point. They need somebody to make sure everything is done, like you said, properly. So the IRS doesn't come after them at some point.
I think that's the other reason you do planning in advance too, right? So the more that we're doing that type of planning and getting clients organized, the easier it is for their family in an already really difficult time to step in and manage things, right? So I think people are sometimes surprised at how difficult it is, right? So a lot of folks will say to me, well, I don't really need documents because I'm married. I have a spouse. They'll be able to do everything for me. And that's just not the case. That's not how the law works. So without those documents, your spouse actually doesn't have the authority to do anything. So in addition to dealing with, a death or even prolonged illness, they're trying to deal with this extra thing on top, which is really difficult.
Sure.
Yeah.
What is the process for estate planning, or why planning? Let's start there.
So I think the why planning has a lot of answers, right? So the first and most important is that you're setting your family up for success if something unexpected happens, right? So if we have some kind of incapacity event, or if we have a premature death or something of that nature, you're making sure that your spouse, your children, whoever your beneficiaries are protected. And there's a lot of ways that we can set that up and give them protections that they can't even give to themselves. So I think that's the main driving force.
Set up your family.
Yep.
I think it's really cool if you can leave your family in an even better situation if you're no longer here.
Yeah.
Okay, so set up your family for success afterwards.
Obviously, we're going to do tax planning as part of that, right? I
Save
don't,
money.
yeah, I don't think that's the primary driver, but I
No.
think it's an important piece, right? You want to not even just taxes and saving money, but also saving money in the process, right? So the easier the plan is to administer, the less you're going to pay lawyers on the back end to fix it all for you. Yeah.
Okay. So be more efficient with it. It makes it easier.
Yep.
Ease of management. Going back to my friend's father, he had about 6 or 7 different IRAs, retirement accounts. So now we have to go to 6 or 7 different places to take care of it. So when you plan, I said to the mom, I mean, ideally, you can get these down to 2 IRAs. Regular IRA, Roth IRA. She's like, what? But then I said to her daughters, how much easier would that be for them?
Right.
Too.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Yeah. And you can give your kids a lot of added protections too, right? So we can build in trusts that have divorce protection and creditor protection. And those are things that your kids can't set up for themselves even, right? So I always tell my clients it's a gift that you're giving them because you're putting them in a better position that they can't get to without your help and without the right planning.
And I think too, when you bring in, say, real estate, more than one property or businesses, planning saves a lot of money too. And it also makes it so much easier, that transition, instead of having forced to sell a real estate at a loss or really quickly, and you're taking a big difference in price cut, or even a business. That's really important.
The family-owned businesses are the hardest, I think, for planning, right? Because we've got a lot of emotion in addition to the logistics and the finances and all that stuff. And just because it's harder doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, though, right?
You need to do more.
That's actually where you need to do it more. But it's hard to do sometimes. So, but that's why you have people like us that can help guide you through that.
Exactly. And I've seen too, if some siblings are in the business and some siblings aren't in the business, and to make sure that there isn't any ill will among them.
It's hard. But important.
So how does the process start?
So typically I get a phone call, right, that says, hi, I talked to Jessica and she said, I really need a will. What does that mean? What do I do? So I try to make the process as simple as possible because I think it's something that's easy to procrastinate anyway. So I want to take away the natural tendency to do that. So typically what we would do is have an initial 5-minute call just so a client, can tell I'm a regular human and know how to talk, right? And then we would set up a meeting. And so I don't charge for initial consultations. It really is a chance for us to kind of get to know each other. And at the meeting, we'll talk about goals and family situations and what your assets look like, whether there's a family-owned business or IRAs, et cetera. And from that, we can really have a detailed conversation about what kind of estate planning you need, what that looks like, and then what the cost of doing it is.
How complex is it? Going to be something simple?
And it varies, right, from person to person. And it's not always just related to net worth, although that is a piece of it. But blended families have a different level of complexity, or family-owned businesses, or single folks who may not have children. So every client's a little bit different. And that's why I think that first initial meeting is so important, because it gives us a chance to kind of get into what makes the client special, right?
I would say a lot of time I get feedback, I don't know what to do with my estate, so haven't done anything. I haven't planned anything. And I try to tell them, just talk to the attorney, because you can start brainstorming and collaborating different ideas.
Yeah, so I always, I hear that a lot too, and I always make the joke of, you don't try to diagnose yourself before you go to the doctor, right? So why are you trying to create your whole plan before you come talk to me, right? And sometimes, take the most common thing people can agree on, appointment of a guardian, right? The most common that young couples come in and they just cannot agree on. And 99 times out of 100, when I sit at a table with them, we can have a conversation where we get to something everyone agrees to, because I have ideas they might not have, or I can hear what they're saying to each other better than they can, and that's just one example. But I think sometimes when you have a third party who's not involved at all in the conversation, who does this day in and day out, that different ideas come out that you might not have thought of.
Yeah, that's a great example. You do it every day. So you've seen so many different variations
yeah.
and scenarios and what's
Exactly.
worked, what hasn't worked so well and stuff. And how important is it, like after a divorce,
Yeah.
to get your estate stuff done?
Crazy important. And in fact, if you're about to get divorced, it's really important to take a look at it beforehand even.
Do it ASAP.
Yeah, so once you're in the divorce proceeding, you're kind of limited in what you can change and not change, but beforehand you have a lot of flexibility. And then afterward, you obviously really need to update everything. When you no longer have a spouse, all the tax planning changes, the trust for your kids change, right? A lot of things really change. So I have a lot of clients who come in post-divorce and redo the whole plan. Yeah.
Or probably also after a death.
Yes, absolutely.
Losing a spouse or losing a child, a parent.
Any major life change, right? And they're not all negative. Sometimes it's, I inherited $20 million. And we say, woohoo, right? That's a great life change. Come on in. So I think anytime there's something substantial changes, you really want to sit down and look at what you've done. But I do that with clients all the time, right? And it's not something I'm charging them to do, right? We sit down and have a conversation of what's changed in your life and what did we do before and do we need to redo it? So it's not as painful as people think it is, I think.
Or if there's a tax law change too.
Or the tax law change, which could happen.
Regular people don't really know about so much.
Right.
But that's when it's good to just review it every so often because something that we put in years ago doesn't apply anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Or it's completely changed.
Yeah. I have a great example of that luckily was not my client, but New Jersey used to have a $675,000 exemption amount, which meant that's what you could give free, right, of estate taxes. And so we had extra wealthy clients who said, well, we'll give that amount to the grandkids and the rest to my kids. But they didn't say 675. They said the greatest amount that could pass free. And then the laws all changed, and now they could pass everything free to the grandkids.
Oh, lucky grandkids.
So the grandkids got real lucky, yeah. But it's just a funny example, true, but funny example of how changes in the law can really change what your documents say.
Yeah, that's why we need professionals.
Yeah, that was an oopsie.
And we were talking earlier, I love when the client retires, we sit down, we do a family meeting. And the attorney's involved, I'm involved, the kids are involved, or whoever's going to be the power of attorney or executor of the estate are involved. And really to go over where all the documents are, who's the professional, like if it's Stacy, this is Stacy, this is her contact information. So if something does happen, they get in a car accident, they're in a coma, they pass away, you know who to contact. And also what all the documents, and we'll go into these next, what all the documents are, what they mean, and how they're supposed to work too. So everyone comes from a place of understanding instead of kind of what's in their mind or what they think is expected of them to do. They know exactly what their role is, their responsibility, and how more organized it is. It's just so much easier for everyone involved.
Well, I think it helps keep families getting along too, right? So usually where we see families fighting, it's a situation where someone's expectations are very different from reality. So it isn't always, people always ask me, is it your wealthiest clients? Is it your least wealthy clients? It's not really related to that. It typically is where a member of the family is very surprised. And it doesn't matter what that surprise is. It could be what they're inheriting or who got the jobs that they didn't get. And I think having that family meeting really helps to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, and you don't have to talk specific numbers. No. Oh, this is a $1 million estate, a $5 million estate. But for them to understand, okay, this is an average amount of money that I have, whether it's earmarked for a nursing home cost at some point or inheritance or what. But you're right. I think when people are blindsided by things, it can get nasty. Because grief is a very selfish emotion because we're always right. I'm missing this person. I'm only concerned about me missing somebody. And you mix that with money.
It's not good.
So what are the key pieces for a well-rounded estate?
Yeah, so I call them foundational documents, right? So for any client that comes in, they need foundational documents, whether they have $100 million or $100, right? It doesn't really matter.
Because everyone, in essence, has an estate.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, yes. And so there's 4 real foundational documents that every person should have. And so if you don't have them, then you should. And so those are a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy. Some people call those living wills, advanced directives, different names for the same darn thing, right? A will, and then a revocable trust. That last one, I think, is the document that surprises most people.
Yeah.
So back in, I think, probably like the 90s, people were just doing wills and putting everything in the will. And there's a number of really important administrative reasons not to just rely on a will and to have that extra revocable trust in place as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So a few just off the top of my
Yeah.
head, a will isn't private once a person dies, right? So it gets probated and it's part of the public record. So some people don't want everyone to know, their business.
Sure.
I also think one of the really big ones is that if you have any kind of continuing trust, like a trust for your kids, that if you put that trust in a will, the court retains jurisdiction over it. So the court's involved in that trust for all of time. And we don't really want that because courts are slow and expensive and they add a whole bunch of hassle. So if we take that same trust for a kid and put it in that revocable trust instead, we get to skip all that. So it's things like that that make the revocable trust really, really important. And it can also be really helpful for incapacity planning, particularly for my clients who maybe aren't married or single, that type of thing.
I was just going to go into that. Yes. So when you have a client who is single, no kids, and they still need a power of attorney.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, because the power of attorney is going to help the person file taxes, personal tax stuff. But if you put stuff into a trust, the trustee can automatically start taking over their financial affairs, paying their bills, going to the bank for them, those type of things. So it's a lot quicker of a transition.
Absolutely. And it's easier to do. And there are also professional trustees out there for folks if they don't have anybody to name too, right?
Yes.
So I know I get a lot of clients who are very nervous because they just don't have anybody to name, right? They've got lots of friends, but no one that kind of rises to that level of, hey, they're going to pay my cable bill every month, right? And so it's important, I think, for folks to realize there are solutions for that out there.
Yeah, you might have siblings, but they might not be financially responsible or in bad marriages
or they live across the globe, or it could be anything, right? I mean, they're not going to be that much help from India, right? Or wherever,
It'll be a big headache for everybody involved in that. Okay, so we talked about power of attorney, who's going to make decisions for you on your behalf, handle your real estate if they want to sell the house, bank accounts, investment accounts, retirement accounts, and then you also have where you can have a trust with a trustee who whatever assets are placed into the trust, they can handle those for you. And just because you have a trust doesn't mean you have anything in it.
Correct, right? It might be an unfunded trust. And I think somewhere along the line, people thought trust means, right, I'm a Rockefeller and so I have a bajillion dollars, right? But trusts are used for all kinds of different reasons. And some of them are administrative, some are tax, some are protections, right, for your kids, for instance. So there are lots of different types of trusts and different reasons to use them. So don't let that word scare you off. I think some people are intimidated by the idea of a trust, but it doesn't necessarily really impact your day-to-day.
And how much is a trust going to cost me?
Yeah, exactly.
All this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about cost.
Sure.
What can people expect to pay for those the fundamental documents?
Yeah. So, I think part of the mystery of estate planning, right, is that most people, I think, come in my office having no idea of what the cost should be, right? So there's not a lot of market knowledge on it, I feel like. And so I think there are certain, right, if you get quoted a fee that is too low, you should run, right? So you want to know that you're in that right ballpark, I think. So for most folks, I think my clients who are, married, so we're doing documents for husband and wife, for instance, we're doing those foundational documents. You're probably somewhere in the $4,000 to $5,000 range for the package. Single person would be less. If someone has quoted you $500 to do all those documents, that's bad, right? So I think keeping in mind that you want to be with a professional who really does that for a living is really important, because there are unfortunately a lot of folks out there who will do what they think is a simple will, which I don't even think that's a thing. And then you end up with something that doesn't work for your needs, which is unfortunate.
And then you have to pay.
Then you have to pay me again later, right? Which is silly. So now you paid twice instead of just doing it the one time the right way.
I've seen where real estate attorneys will do it.
I was
A
going to
lot.
pick on them.
Yeah. I've seen that a lot in divorce attorneys.
Yeah.
And I have one client and we got her power of attorney and her divorce attorney did it for her. On one hand, I was happy that the divorce attorney was aware that she should get it done.
Yeah.
But it wasn't signed or notarized or anything, so it
Oh.
wasn't in effect at all.
No.
So you want somebody who does it nonstop because, you may pay a little bit more, but it's going to save the estate probably a lot of
Way more
time,
than you
money,
paid.
and hassle. And also to make sure it's done right.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. And then how you want it to. I think that's the biggest part. Like, you're going to have a conversation with them and they're going to explain how they want their estate laid out.
Yep.
You'll know what tools they'll need to implement it.
Yep.
And stuff.
Yeah, so really we don't talk about, right, how do we effectuate that. I talk to clients about what their goal is, right? And then I tell them how to get to the goal because that's my job. Yeah.
I got asked a question in an interview. Does everybody need a trust?
Yeah. So I think almost everyone needs that revocable trust that we were just talking about. So I think, as an example, the last just plain old will that I did was for an older gentleman who was, I think, almost 70. He had a pretty low net worth, so a home and an IRA, and that was it. And he was going to leave everything to his sister. Okay. I mean, yeah, he probably didn't need much more than that.
Yeah.
But as soon as you have any younger beneficiaries or assets that are above and beyond what I just described, you really need the trust document. So I would say 99.99% of my clients have that document in place.
Yeah. I said that the trust probably gives you the most control of your assets now and when you pass away.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
Because you can set the boundaries, what money can come out, how much can come out, at what time it can come out, what it can be used for. So if you are a control freak, it will give you the most control, especially if you're no longer here for your assets or for your family, especially if you have kids who have an addiction problem or in a rocky marriage, we'll say, or spenders, don't really value money, or you're nervous about it. Trust is very important.
Yeah, so I think the trusts do allow you to be restrictive if you want to, but you can also use them in ways that are not restrictive. So sometimes I have clients who come in and say, my children are really mature, they don't need a trust. And I say, well, why don't we do this instead? Why don't we give them the gift of a trust? We'll let them be their own trustee. So they get to write themselves checks. They can take all the money out if they want to. But if they leave the money in there, it gives them divorce protection over that money. So it gives them the choice to have the divorce protection if they need it. And if they decide they don't need it, they can take all the money out, right? So there's a lot of reasons to use trusts, even if you don't want to restrict the money necessarily.
Yeah, you can give them the power over whether they keep it in or take the money out.
Yeah.
And stuff. I have a client whose daughter just got married. Very exciting. He has 2 kids from a previous marriage. And I was explaining to them that they probably should update their estate documents because they have a new addition to the family and new grandchildren. And they started bringing up that the ex-wife is always going after him for more money.
Okay.
And they have a good amount of assets. So I said, well, if they inherited this money, what do you think the ex-wife's going to try to do if she's already doing that? So that kind of put a fire under their butt to get going, with it and stuff. But exactly for those reasons. What haven't we covered, Stacey, that they should know?
So I think just making sure you have a good team in place is really important. So that means not just a great lawyer, but also a great financial advisor. So there's a lot of ways that those things work together. So one of my favorite examples to use is that I can build you this beautiful estate plan, but if you have an IRA that has a beneficiary designation that doesn't match what we did, it's not going to work, right? So it's important that you have folks on your team who can coordinate. So my favorite thing is when we can all kind of, sit down and I can say, hey, Jess, what is the beneficiary designation saying? Can we update it to be this instead? And so I think that is probably one of the most important pieces and the piece that people get wrong most often.
That's a great point. So many women have bulk of their money in retirement is in IRAs. That's not going to pass through the estate.
Right. Exactly.
So we need to make sure that is aligned with what you put into your will, or that they work together.
Right.
At
Exactly.
least. And stuff. And I was just going through that with another woman in our previous club, and she has probably 70% of her assets in retirement accounts. Right? Large pension, all that stuff.
Yep.
And she was going into it the mentality that it was all going to pass through the estate, and she was figuring out percentages in her mind. And we go, well, we actually have to view them two separate things.
Yeah.
And then make sure that the kids get a certain amount that she wanted, and it works out properly with the retirement accounts with taxes,
right,
and stuff, and then the other percent to her mom in a trust,
and
everything. So that's kind of the second piece of it, right? It needs to be part of the conversation in the beginning, but then to make sure beneficiaries line up with it.
Yep.
What are your feelings on transfer on death accounts and payable on death accounts?
Man, they're the bane of my existence.
Let's explain what they are.
Go ahead.
Because I get this question.
Okay.
So like a bank account. You can basically put a beneficiary on a bank account.
You can.
So if I pass away, it automatically goes to my husband as a transfer on death. On my death, it transfers to him.
Yeah. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of people get bad advice on those types of things, whether it's not malicious bad advice. It's just they went and set it up and someone said, oh, don't you want your husband to get this account? And they said, well, yeah, of course I do. And so they put the TOD, transfer on death, or POD, pay on death designation on there. But the problem is that trumps whatever your documents say. And so you might need tax planning, or you might want a trust for your spouse, or there could be a million reasons why we've tailored your plan a special way, and now that account doesn't even flow through the plan. The other big problem with them is most people forget they've done it. Yeah. And so sometimes they don't even know the account is set up that way. So it's really important to keep track of those and make sure that if you put one of those designations on, there's a really, really good reason for it. But usually I'm advising people to take those off.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also thinking about life insurance, because we kind of forget about those, especially if they're at work and they're just automatically enrolled in them.
Yep.
You forget about who's your beneficiary. We also see it with those and with 401ks, when somebody takes over the plan, sometimes your beneficiaries get dropped.
Really?
So you need to always make sure, let's say your 401k goes from Fidelity to Vanguard, sometimes the beneficiary doesn't carry over, and you need to reestablish who the beneficiary is.
That's scary. I didn't know that.
But it's kind of like those, you talk about, you forget about these transfer on death accounts, you forget about like those old 401ks, those old pensions, old life insurance policies. Sometimes there's one kid named on them.
Yeah.
That means that one kid's getting them,
That's
even
right.
if you have 3 other kids. Or your ex is on them, those type of things.
Yeah, and there's been so much case law in the state of New Jersey and across the nation, actually, trying to challenge those. And time after time, the courts just uphold what the beneficiary designation says. So you really have to have it buttoned down, because there's very little wiggle room if something happens and you're stuck with something that is clearly makes no sense. It doesn't necessarily matter.
Yeah, so to make sure everything is organized, which is why it's nice just to meet with you, meet with me periodically to make sure all those checklist items are taken care of.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you, Stacey. This was fun. We get to meet her in a few weeks, in a few months. And they have your information up on the website, so if they need you, they know where to find you. Bye, ladies.